The van pulls up to Camp F at 2:47 a.m. No sirens, no ceremony, just the low rumble of an engine cutting through Louisiana darkness. Inside, a man sits in full restraints. Waist chain, leg irons, handcuffs connecting to a belly belt. He's leaving death row tier, the place he's called home for over a decade, for the last time. This isn't a transfer to another facility. This isn't a court appearance. This is the final ride. 17 hours from now, he'll be strapped to a gurney in a room with 12 witnesses watching through glass. Angola State Penitentiary, America's bloodiest prison. 18,000 acres of former slave plantation turned maximum security. And somewhere in the administrative segregation unit sits death row, a place where men wait an average of 15 years for this exact moment. The psychological unraveling doesn't begin on execution day. It starts the moment they tell you the date, sometimes months in advance, sometimes just weeks. You know when you're going to die. You know the method. You know the room. And you spend every single day watching that calendar close in. But what happens in those final hours? What goes through a person's mind when they're moved from their cell for the last time? When the tier that housed them for years disappears behind locked gates? Former Warden Burl Kane once said the men on Angola's death row aren't waiting to die. They're learning how. This is the story of that education. The final transfer. The psychology of countdown. And what really happens inside the belly of America's most notorious execution chamber. Real quick, what you just saw is only the beginning. If you want the full story about how America's most secure prison became a gang factory, subscribe and turn on notifications right now. Hit the like button so this reaches more people. These investigations take months to verify, and most channels won't touch them. Let's continue. Death row at Angola doesn't look like most people imagine. No dark medieval dungeon. No rows of cages. It's clinical, organized, almost mundane in its precision. The condemned live in administrative segregation, a fancy term for solitary confinement stretched across years. 63 men currently occupy these cells, each one in a 6x9 foot space, 23 hours a day, every single day, for an average of 14.7 years, according to Bureau of Justice statistics. The tier operates on absolute routine. Wake up at 6 a.m., breakfast through a slot, 1 hour of recreation in a wire cage outdoors, alone, shower 3 times a week, commissary once a week if you have money, visits on weekends if anyone still comes. The Louisiana Department of Corrections doesn't use the term death watch. They call it pre-execution protocol. It begins the moment the governor's office confirms there will be no stay of execution, usually 30 to 45 days before the scheduled date. That's when everything changes. Former Angola chaplain Kerry Myers described it in his testimony to the Louisiana Pardon Board. You can see it in their eyes. The exact moment they know the date. Some men break immediately. Others go completely silent. But everyone changes. The condemned man gets moved to a different cell, closer to administrative offices. Increased monitoring. Guards log behavior every 15 minutes. Meals become more frequent. Some men stop eating entirely. Others request specific foods they haven't had in years. Phone calls increase. Legal visits intensify. Family members who haven't visited in a decade suddenly appear. The chaplain starts coming daily instead of weekly. Here's what most people don't understand. Louisiana gives the condemned man a choice: lethal injection or electrocution. The electric chair, gruesome Gertie as it was known, was retired, but the option remained on the books until 2021. For men sentenced before then, the choice still stands. In 2010, Gerald Bordelon became the first person executed in Louisiana in nearly a decade. He'd been on death row for 12 years. convicted of murdering his 12-year-old stepdaughter in Baton Rouge. When his execution date arrived, he did something unusual. He volunteered. Most death row inmates fight their execution until the last possible second. Appeals, motions, stays. Bordelon dropped all his appeals, refused to fight, told his attorneys he wanted to die. The warden at the time later told reporters that Bordelon's calm was more disturbing than any panic they'd witnessed. He ate his last meal, fried chicken, biscuits, and sweet tea without hesitation. He made small talk with guards. He walked to the execution chamber under his own power. But Bordelon was an outlier. Most men on Angola's death row cling to life with everything they have. Because once you enter pre-execution protocol, the psychological warfare becomes suffocating. Sleep becomes impossible. Every sound could be the guard coming to tell you it's time. Every door opening could be your lawyer with bad news or good news that turns out to be temporary. The Louisiana Supreme Court has issued stays of execution with less than 12 hours to spare. In some cases, men have eaten their last meal, said goodbye to family, and had their heads shaved, only to be told the execution is postponed. Then they go back to the cell and wait again. Dr. Craig Haney, a psychologist who has studied death row inmates for over 30 years, documented what he calls death row syndrome. Chronic depression, anxiety, hallucinations, paranoia, emotional flatness. After years in solitary confinement, many inmates lose the ability to process complex thought. Angola's death row tier has recorded multiple suicide attempts during pre-execution protocol. Men who survived 15 years suddenly can't make it through the final 30 days. But the state has protocols for that too. If you're suicidal, they put you on watch, strip your cell, give you a suicide smock, monitor you every 5 minutes instead of 15. Because Louisiana has to keep you alive until they kill you themselves. The worst part isn't dying. The worst part is knowing exactly when. At Angola, the notification process follows strict protocol. The warden doesn't just show up at your cell with a date. The legal system moves first. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals issues its ruling. The Louisiana Supreme Court denies the appeal. The U.S. Supreme Court declines to hear the case. The governor's office confirms no clemency will be granted. Only then does the Louisiana Department of Corrections schedule the execution. By law, the condemned must receive 30 days' notice. Sometimes they get more, never less. The warden walks to the cell personally, usually brings the chaplain. They tell you face to face. Then they hand you a document with the date, time, and method printed in official letterhead. Former death row inmate Wilbert Rideau, whose sentence was eventually commuted, described this moment in his memoir. He spent 44 years at Angola, much of it on death row before his sentence was reduced. He wrote, "Men would scream. Some would collapse. Others would go completely catatonic. The guards never knew which reaction they'd get." The document includes more than just the execution date. It outlines visitation rights for the final weeks, explains the last meal process, details property distribution, lists the people who can witness the execution, limited to 5 chosen by the condemned, plus required state witnesses. Here's what the document doesn't say. You will be moved 3 separate times in your final 48 hours. First move, 72 hours before execution, you transfer to a special observation cell, closer to the execution chamber. The guards can see you at all times. No privacy, not even for the toilet. Second move, 24 hours before execution, you transfer again, this time to a holding cell directly adjacent to the execution chamber. You can hear everything. Technicians testing equipment, guards doing walk-throughs, the witnesses gathering in the viewing room. Third move, execution day. The final 17 steps from holding cell to gurney. But between notification and that first move, something strange happens. The tier develops its own ritual. Death row inmates in adjacent cells start talking more, sharing commissary items, offering what little comfort exists in that environment. Even men who haven't spoken in years will acknowledge the countdown, because they all know this will be them someday, maybe next month, maybe next year. But eventually, the warden will walk to their cell too. In 2019, Robert Gleason became one of the last men executed in Virginia before the state limited its death penalty. He'd actually killed 2 other inmates while already serving life without parole, specifically to get death row and force the state to execute him. When he received his notification, he smiled. But most men don't smile. The panic attacks start within hours of notification. According to medical records from Louisiana's death row, 73% of condemned inmates request psychiatric medication within the first week of receiving their execution date. Sleep vanishes entirely. The prison logs document men pacing their cells at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., all night. Some stop, sleeping altogether. Antoinette Frank, the only woman on Louisiana's death row convicted of murdering a fellow police officer and 2 others in 1995, has received execution dates 3 separate times. Each time, appeals have resulted in stays. Each time, she's gone through the notification process, the psychological preparation for death, only to have it delayed again. Defense attorneys call this torture by hope. The cruelty isn't just the execution, it's the repeated cycle of countdown and reprieve. At Angola, the guards maintain detailed logs during the notification period. Every 15 minutes, they record the inmate's behavior: sleeping, pacing, crying, praying, reading, staring. One log entry from a 2008 case, obtained through FOIA requests, simply noted at 4:47 a.m. Inmate sitting motionless on bunk. Has not moved in over 2 hours. Refused breakfast. No verbal response to check-in. The next entry, 15 minutes later. Inmate same position. Medical notified. By day 3 after notification, most men enter what psychologists call anticipatory grief. They're mourning their own death before it happens. Some write letters to family. Others refuse all contact. They're already gone in their minds. The chaplain's visits increase, not because the inmates request it, because the protocol requires it. The state needs documentation that spiritual counsel was offered. Whether it's accepted doesn't matter for the paperwork. But here's the cruelest part. After notification, you still have weeks left. 30 days minimum. Sometimes 45. Sometimes 60 if appeals are pending. That's a long time to know exactly when you're going to die. Long enough to experience every stage of grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression. Some even reach acceptance. And then, just when you've made peace with it, the appeals process might grant a stay. You go back to indefinite waiting. The date disappears. But the damage is already done. Your mind has already walked through your own death 1,000 times. The 72-hour mark hits, like a door slamming shut. At Angola, they come for you at dawn, usually between 5 and 6 a.m. when the tier is quietest. 6 guards minimum. Full restraint protocol. They're not taking chances. Not because they think you'll escape, but because policy demands it. The handcuffs go on first, then the belly belt. The chain connects your wrists to your waist. Leg irons next. 18 inches of chain between your ankles. Enough to shuffle, not enough to run. They inventory everything in your cell. Every letter, every photograph, every commissary item. The state catalogs it all. Family can request property after the execution. Most don't. Then you walk, shuffling in leg irons down the tier you've lived on for years. Past cells holding men you've talked to through walls. Men who've become the closest thing to friends this place allows. No one speaks. The tier goes silent when the final transfer happens. Even the guards keep conversation to operational necessities. Turn left. Stop. Through the gate. The observation cell looks identical to your old one. 6 by 9 feet. Metal bunk. Steel toilet. But there's one critical difference. The guards can see everything. The cell faces directly into a monitoring station. 2 guards. 24-hour watch. You're never alone. Never out of sight. Privacy ceases to exist. Using the toilet. Changing clothes. Breaking down. All of it observed and documented. This is where the last meals get planned. Louisiana allows condemned inmates to request anything within a $75 budget. No alcohol. No tobacco. But almost anything else. Gerald Bordelon requested fried chicken biscuits and sweet tea. Simple, traditional Louisiana food. He ate most of it. But many men can't eat it all. The last meal sits untouched. The thought of food becomes impossible when your body knows what's coming. The visits intensify during these 72 hours. Family members get extended access, up to 6 hours a day instead of the usual 2. The visits happen in a special room, still separated by glass, still using phones, but the time restriction loosens. These goodbyes are documented in visiting logs. In 2012, one condemned man's mother visited for 17 hours across 3 days. She brought his children, ages 6 and 9. They'd never been to Angola before. She wanted them to see their father one last time. The children asked why Daddy had to stay in the special room, why he couldn't come home. The visiting room guard's report noted, inmate maintained composure until children left, broke down completely after. At the 48-hour mark, the second transfer happens. This move is shorter, just down a hallway, but the destination changes everything. The holding cell sits adjacent to the execution chamber, literally shares a wall with the room where you'll die. You can hear everything happening on the other side. Technicians entering, equipment being tested, voices discussing procedures. The sounds are deliberately audible. Some former corrections officers have admitted this isn't accidental. The proximity is psychological. It's meant to break down resistance, ensure compliance. The holding cell has even less than the observation cell. A bunk, a toilet, nothing else. No books, no photos, no distractions. Just you and the sound of preparation. During the final 24 hours, the chaplain has unlimited access. If you want spiritual counsel, it's available constantly. Some men pray for hours. Others refuse all contact. The last phone calls happen in this window. Louisiana allows condemned inmates to make final calls to immediate family. Monitored, recorded, limited to 15 minutes each. Most men call their mothers. One transcript from a 2009 case, released after appeal denials became final, captured a final call. Mama, I need you to know. Don't you say goodbye to me. I have to. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, baby. I know. The call lasted 7 minutes. The condemned man never spoke to his mother again. Medical checks increase during the holding period. Blood pressure, heart rate, mental status evaluation. The state needs to ensure you're healthy enough to execute. If you have a medical emergency, they'll save your life, so they can end it on schedule. Defense attorneys make their final arguments during this period, submitting last-minute appeals to any court that might hear them. Most get denied within hours. Some appeals are filed so close to execution time that judges are on standby, ready to rule immediately. In Louisiana, the governor has authority to grant clemency up until the moment of execution. Phone calls come into the prison right up to the deadline. Lawyers calling with updates. Family members begging for intervention. The warden keeps a direct line to the governor's office. If clemency comes through, the execution stops. If it doesn't, it proceeds. But in that holding cell, during those final 24 hours, the condemned man doesn't know which way it will go. Hope and terror exist simultaneously. Schrodinger's execution. You're both saved and dead until someone opens that door. The final meal gets served 6 hours before execution, brought directly to the holding cell. The condemned can eat or refuse. No pressure, but the clock keeps moving regardless. At Angola, they serve the last meal on real plates, not the plastic trays used elsewhere in the prison. It's a small gesture, the only dignity the system offers at this stage. After the meal comes the final shower. Clean clothes, not the orange jumpsuit, but a simple prison-issue shirt and pants. Hair combed, face washed, presentable for the witnesses. Because in a few hours, 12 people will watch through glass as you die, and the state wants you to look composed, calm, like the system works exactly as intended. Dr. Robert Johnson spent 20 years interviewing death row inmates across America. His research, published in Death Work, a study of the modern execution process, reveals something disturbing. The execution doesn't kill you just once. It kills you psychologically every single day you wait. Angola's death row demonstrates this in stark detail. The average wait time, 14.7 years, means condemned men experience roughly 5,300 days of knowing they'll be executed. Each day is a small death, a piece of sanity chipped away. The human brain isn't designed to process its own mortality on a continuous loop. We're built to suppress thoughts of death, to live as if we're immortal. That's how most people function day to day. Death row inmates don't get that luxury. Every morning you wake up, the first thought is, I'm going to be executed. Every meal, this could be practice for the last one. Every visit, maybe the final time. Every night, another day closer. Psychologists call this death anxiety, but that term doesn't capture the full scope. This isn't abstract worry about eventual mortality. This is concrete, scheduled, state-sanctioned killing that you're waiting for while fully conscious and aware. The mental health records from Angola's death row, obtained through litigation in appeals cases, show a pattern. Almost every condemned inmate develops at least one diagnosed psychiatric condition after arrival. Depression, anxiety disorders, PTSD, psychotic episodes. Some conditions emerge from the crime itself and the trial, but many develop purely from the waiting. 23 hours a day in a 6x9 cell. No physical contact with other humans. Everything passed through slots or behind glass. No control over your environment. Lights controlled externally. Temperature controlled externally. Food, water, toilet flushing, all on someone else's schedule. And you know this will continue until they kill you. The brain starts breaking down. Cognitive function deteriorates. Memory problems develop. Some inmates report losing the ability to think in complex terms. Everything becomes immediate, present-focused, because planning for a future that won't exist becomes impossible. John Thompson spent 14 years on Louisiana's death row before DNA evidence exonerated him in 2003. After his release, he described the psychological damage. You don't come back from that. Part of you dies in there, and it stays dead even when you walk out. But most men on Angola's death row won't walk out. They know this. The statistics are clear. Since Louisiana reinstated the death penalty in 1976, 28 men have been executed. Only a handful have had sentences commuted or overturned. The waiting becomes a form of torture. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture has argued that prolonged death row detention constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. Some countries, Japan for instance, don't tell inmates their execution date until the morning of. The argument is that knowing too far in advance amplifies suffering. Louisiana takes the opposite approach. 30 days minimum notice. Sometimes 60. Sometimes 90 if appeals are pending. You watch the calendar. You count the days. Then the weeks. Then the hours. Former death row counselor Sister Helen Prejean, whose work inspired the film Dead Man Walking, documented this countdown psychology. She described sitting with men in their final days. How time becomes elastic. How minutes feel like hours. How the brain oscillates between desperate hope and resigned acceptance. The appeals process makes it worse. Every legal filing creates a small burst of hope. Maybe this one will work. Maybe this judge will see it differently. Maybe someone will finally recognize the error. And then the denial comes. Hope collapses. Depression deepens. This cycle repeats dozens of times, sometimes hundreds. Appeals at the state level, federal level, circuit courts, Supreme Court, clemency petitions, each one a potential lifeline, each one statistically unlikely to succeed. At Angola, the guards witness this deterioration firsthand. Many officers develop their own trauma from watching men slowly disintegrate mentally. The turnover rate for death row guards is significantly higher than general population units. One former Angola officer, speaking anonymously to the Marshall Project in 2017, said, "You're not supposed to get attached, but you see the same guy every day for 10 years. You watch him age, watch him break down, and then one day you walk him to the chamber. That stays with you." The condemned men develop coping mechanisms. Some create rigid routines, exercise schedules, reading patterns, prayer times. Structure provides illusion of control. Others dissociate completely. They mentally check out, stop talking, stop engaging, exist in a fog until the state brings them back to awareness for the execution. And some fight until the last second. Every appeal, every motion, every procedural argument, clinging to life with pure legal warfare. But eventually, for most, the date becomes final. No more appeals, no more stays. The governor declines clemency. The courts are exhausted. That's when acceptance comes. Not peaceful acceptance, not spiritual enlightenment, just the cold recognition that this is actually happening. The abstract threat becomes concrete reality. The final 72 hours amplify everything. Sleep becomes impossible. Appetite disappears. The body knows. Even if the mind hasn't fully processed it, the body understands. Stress hormones flood the system. Heart rate elevates. Blood pressure spikes. The fight or flight response activates. But there's nowhere to run and nothing to fight. You just wait. In a cell, watching the clock, counting down to the moment when they'll strap you to a gurney and pump chemicals into your veins until your heart stops. The cruelty isn't the execution itself. The cruelty is knowing it's coming, living with that knowledge, carrying it every moment of every day, until finally the door opens and the waiting ends. At 5:47 p.m., the warden arrives at the holding cell. He's done this before, multiple times, but it never gets routine. He carries a document, the final warrant, signed by the judge, confirming no stays have been issued. It's time. 2 words. That's all it takes. The door opens. The condemned man stands. Some require assistance. Legs that haven't worked properly in days suddenly need to carry them 17 steps. The restraints are different now. Lighter. No leg irons for this walk. Just handcuffs. The state doesn't want you shuffling. They want you walking upright, appearing voluntary. 6 guards form an escort. 2 in front, 2 behind, 1 on each side. They've rehearsed this. They know the exact pace, the exact positioning, every detail choreographed. The hallway is 17 steps long. That's the exact distance from holding cell to execution chamber at Angola. 17 steps designed to be walked in under 90 seconds. Quick enough to prevent resistance. Slow enough to maintain dignity. The execution chamber door stands open. Inside, everything is ready. The gurney dominates the center of the room. Padded. Adjusted to body height. Straps already loosened and ready. For lines prepared and tested. Medical cart, with 3 syringes positioned nearby. Witnesses are already seated. Behind thick glass. 12 people total. 5 chosen by the condemned. The rest mandated by law: warden, chaplain, physician, and media representatives. The family section and the victim's family section are separated. Different viewing areas. Same glass. Same view. Some condemned men look at the witnesses. Make eye contact. Mouth final words. Others stare straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the audience to their death. The guards guide you to the gurney. You lie down. The straps come across your chest, waist, arms, and legs. Tight enough to prevent movement, not tight enough to cause pain. Protocol matters, even now. The 4 insertion happens next. 2 lines, 1 in each arm. Backup in case one fails. The medical technician, never a licensed doctor, as medical ethics prohibit participation, finds the vein, inserts the catheter, secures it with tape. Saline drip starts, keeps the line open, prevents clotting. The warden reads the death warrant aloud. Name, crime, sentence, date of execution, the legal formula that justifies this moment. Then comes the final statement. Louisiana allows condemned inmates to make a last statement. No time limit, but most keep it brief. Some apologize. Some proclaim innocence. Some say nothing at all. Gerald Bordelon's last words in 2010. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused. I'm at peace with this. The warden asks, do you have anything to say? This is the last time anyone will ask you a question. The last time your voice matters. Some men use this moment for defiance. Others for redemption. Some for prayer. And then the microphone goes off. The warden signals to the executioner. You can't see who it is. They're behind a one-way mirror in an adjacent room. Anonymous. Protected. 3 chemicals. 3 syringes. Administered in sequence. First, pentobarbital, the anesthetic, designed to render you unconscious in seconds. You feel warmth spreading through your veins. Then nothing. Second, pancuronium bromide, the paralytic, stops all muscle function, including breathing. Third, potassium chloride, stops the heart. The protocol says death occurs within 7 to 11 minutes, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. The witnesses watch your chest stop moving. The physician checks for pulse, confirms cardiac arrest, notes the time. The warden announces, the sentence has been carried out. The curtain closes. It's over. But here's what most people don't realize. For some condemned men, the final walk doesn't end at the gurney. Louisiana has issued 8 stays of execution within 24 hours of the scheduled time. Men who walked through these final procedures, saying goodbye, eating last meals, being placed in holding cells, only to have appeals courts issue emergency stays. They get walked back, returned to death row, the execution rescheduled. Then the entire process starts over. Months later, sometimes years later, the psychological preparation, the countdown, the goodbyes, the final transfer, until eventually one day no stay comes. One such case involved a man who received 3 separate execution dates between 2008 and 2012. 3 times he went through the final 72 hours. 3 times stayed at the last moment. The 4th time, in 2013, no stay came. The execution proceeded. His attorney later told reporters, by the 4th time, he'd already died mentally. His body was just catching up. The death row tier at Angola currently holds 63 men, each one counting down, each one wondering when their notification will come. when the warden will walk to their cell with a date. Some have been waiting 5 years, others 15, a few over 20. The youngest condemned man at Angola is currently 31. He's been on death row since he was 22. He has at least another decade of waiting, statistically speaking, before his execution date arrives. That's 10 more years of living in a 6x9 cell, 10 more years of 23-hour isolation, 10 more years of watching other men take the final walk, until one day it's his turn. The system operates with precision. Legal, documented, procedural, everything by the book. But stripped of the legal language and bureaucratic protocol, it's still the same thing it's always been. The state putting a human being in a cage, telling them exactly when they'll die, making them wait years, then walking them down a hallway and stopping their heart. Angola death row continues. The cells stay occupied. The appeals continue. The countdown never stops. And somewhere in those tiers, right now, a man is lying on a bunk, looking at a calendar, counting the days until his final transfer.